Well, thank you very much, Chairman Bice, Ranking Member Kilme, the whole House Administration Committee for having me here today to testify and have the discussion, as you described it that way, on the topic of congressional continuity. And I'm really grateful for the serious approach that this committee has taken. And if it takes a committee to appoint a committee to make a study to eventually get something done, let's do it now. Let's do it now because we have to. And as has been said, it's not a pleasant topic to think about. It's incredibly serious. And it's serious and so important for the country. You know, it's been 7 years since the shooting at the baseball field. And you know, I've thought about this problem for some time, and I brought it up here and there during certain opportunities. So I'm really grateful that this is happening now. This is really important because not only, as has been mentioned, can we take away the incentive for someone to act in a nefarious way, we're going to preserve the idea that all Americans will have a voice here in Congress, virtually at all times. So I've always thought that out of everything bad that happens, there's a chance to do something good. And I think that that opportunity is here and now. And so again, I'm very grateful for what is being done here by this committee, and that we're taking the time to deliberate and hopefully move forward to find the best response in case the unthinkable ever happens, or the unthinkable that has happened has some success, some negative success. So this isn't just a hypothetical situation we're dealing with today. And you know, I first came to Congress, you know, since I came here, there's been a real uptick in political violence against fellow Americans, against elected officials, increase in violent political rhetoric from elected and non-elected people in social media. And, you know, let's face it, we always talk about the increase of mental health needs in our country. We have a problem. And someone who may have mental health needs does not need to be incentivized towards taking bad action. So in recent years, we've seen the shooting, Congressman Gabby Giffords, anti-Semitic incidents skyrocket, assassination attempts on President Trump. According to a recent Time article, 1/3 of Americans believe that violent action against the government can be justified. John Lewis, colleague, great American, he used to say good trouble. He didn't have this in mind. This is not what he was talking about. So, you know, June 14th, 2017, I was on the baseball field with my colleagues practicing for the baseball game. A violent domestic terrorist attempted to assassinate Republican members of Congress. He had names in his pocket, descriptions in his pocket. This was a clear assassination attempt. And he decided to use murder or assassination as a tool for political change. He wanted to wipe out the Republican majority and change the balance of power in our Congress. 136 rounds were fired on the field at that confrontation. Sitting members of Congress and their staff were seriously injured and required immediate medical intervention. What would have happened if Capitol Police weren't there? He could have killed sitting members. If he had achieved his goal and there were enough members to tip the balance of power in one direction or another, he succeeded. Let's take that opportunity away. Yeah, he could have killed, you know, if someone is killed or incapacitated beyond the ability to serve, that's a problem. So there's too many what ifs in a situation like this because Congress hasn't fully considered the implications of mass casualty event affecting members and the impact it would have on the ability of our Congress to function in a time of need. So I think we need to take some next steps, a process that's a deterrent of a disaster. And I think that we can all stand resolute on this, clearly in a bipartisan fashion. You know, we have plans in place for a president. We have seen that happen in the United States of America. But there is a plan in place for secession, and especially if there's multiple leaders that are killed or incapacitated beyond repair, basically. So I'm really proud to join Representative Kilmer, Timmons, Cleaver in leading a proposed constitutional amendment that would establish a congressional continuity plan by requiring each newly elected member to provide a list of at least 5 individuals who are qualified to serve in the member's place in the event of that member's death during the term. And if they were to pass away, the governor of the state must select a replacement from that list within 10 days. We heard how long it takes for a special election. I just finish with this because I know my time has expired and I appreciate it. You know, we heard it said, you know, hope is wonderful, but it's not a plan. Prayer is great, but it's not a plan. And I just want people to think about, besides the baseball field and the other events, what would we have done on 9/11/2001 if the 4th plane hit the Capitol? We were in session that day. Now yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Wenstrup, and I want to also take a moment to express gratitude for your heroic efforts on the baseball field that day. There were members of the Republican conference that likely may not be with us today if it were not for the heroic efforts that you provided on the field. So we want to show gratitude for that.
Thank you.
At this time, I will begin by recognizing myself for the purpose of asking a question, and then recognize the ranking member, and then our colleagues who might also have additional questions. Let me begin. In 2018, a chartered train carrying Republican lawmakers collided with a garbage truck in Virginia, killing 1 person. In 2020, the COVID pandemic forced Congress to go virtual. My classmate, Congressman-elect Luke Letlow, the husband of the late Julia Letlow, died from complications before he was actually seated as a member of Congress. How do these events, in addition to more recent events like the recent assassination attempts of President Trump, put continuity in a new light?
Well, you know, you saw so many people with COVID dying, and at first we didn't know who was dying and why they were dying necessarily. We've gradually learned who was more vulnerable than others, but at the same time, you know, we have people here with a lot of different medical conditions and different ages, and we saw with COVID that those were reasons for people to be affected and not necessarily live. We fared fairly well, fortunately, in Congress. But there again, that's another situation where we could find ourselves with a huge absence. The train wreck, I can tell you, being on that as well, where we had a large number of members of the House and Senate, if we had hit that truck in a different way, we would have derailed. We were fortunate we hit the back end of the truck and it went spinning. So again, we lucked out. But if we derailed, who knows how many people might have died. So you have to take all of these things in mind. And not only is it important how we posture ourselves and protect ourselves when we gather and even individually, we have to think of what happens afterwards. And, you know, as I look at the baseball field, if Capitol Police weren't there, I mean, Steve Scalise took a bullet for all of us. And because that's the reason Capitol Police were there. If they weren't there, this guy, I'm telling you, walks into this field, he kills 20 to 30 members of Congress and their staff in one morning, changing the balance of power in the House of Representatives. And I would contend that's an insurrection by one person. By one person. And you know what? We try to protect ourselves as best we can, and we've made changes, and we try to increase our security. But bad things happen, and you can have all the security you want. That doesn't stop a pandemic.
Dr. Wenstrup, in my opening statement, I mentioned that there have been 45 proposed constitutional amendments to address the continuity issue, and that none of them have actually been successful. In your opinion, why is a constitutional amendment the sort of only option that you feel like would address this issue?
Well, our founders made constitutional amendments tough for good reason. that it would take the will of a large group of people. I really don't know why all the other opportunities have not come together, but I can't think of a time in history where the continuity of government has been as threatened as it is today. And I think that, I would hope that the American people and all members of Congress, Senate, and the White House would have an understanding as to why this needs to take place, and we probably shouldn't dawdle. I consider not having something in place a national security threat.
Thank you for that. I would say the Civil War times may have also been a time where there was certainly concern about continuity given the engagement, but I appreciate your comments there. At this time, I want to I'm going to recognize the ranking member Kilmer for 5 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I really thank you for being here. I want to thank you for showing up. And you just spoke to two situations that could have been a whole lot worse, right? The train derailment could have flipped the majority in the House for months and months. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the baseball field, only because Leader Scalise was a member of leadership was Capitol Police even present that day. And but for their presence, that could have been much worse. So I think the perspective you bring to this conversation is really important, and I want to thank you for sharing that. I also want to thank you for co-leading the constitutional amendment, and I just want to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about why you decided to sign on to that proposal and what you see the benefits of it as.
Well, as I was reflected on in my opening statement, this concern of mine has been there since the shooting at the baseball field, for sure. And I mention it here for this committee or that committee and just in passing, and I kind of kick myself for not taking action. So I'm extremely grateful to you for coming to me. We know each other, and I think it would mean a lot to me that we take some action here. And as someone who's, I guess we both are retiring from Congress after this term. And so maybe this can be our swan song where we do something good for the sake of the nation, for the sake of this body, and for national security, and to maybe deter bad actors.
Yeah, I know the chairwoman asked you about the choice of pursuing a constitutional amendment. And I think obviously one of the challenges is, we're restricted by the current language of the Constitution to only replace members through election. That automatically runs us into challenges with, and we'll hear from secretaries of state or from the GAO who's talked to secretaries of state, that it just takes time to hold an election, right? You have to have people register as candidates. You have to print ballots. When we talked as a full committee last week, they said, do you want military members to be able to vote? Well, I do, right? And that takes time. And so I'm just curious your take on the benefit of the constitutional amendment approach vis-a-vis other approaches.
Well, one, it really locks it in, and also it shows that it's had very much bipartisan support. But, one of the things I said too is, we have a secession plan for the president, and you go down the secretaries and everything else. They weren't elected either, but they were someone that was selected by the sitting president who was elected. And that's what we're asking to do in the amendment. So I think that was pretty thoughtful, is that the person that was elected is likely choosing someone similar to them, which would be representative of the people that elected the member. So I think that's an important component. And I think that's why it's important to have that list in place. We do it for the speaker, we do it, in other areas too. But what we're doing is saying this is a stopgap. We're not saying you have that seat for the rest of the term or anything else. It's just until the special election goes through its ordinary process. So we constitutionally aren't trying to change the way states operate their elections, but at the same time, we're letting that state or that district have representation.
Thanks so much. I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize Mr. Carey for 5 minutes for questions.
I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity, and Doctor. I think Ohioans know your service, and obviously you and Derek both leaving this institution, really shows in a bipartisan way how the institutional knowledge of this body will lose a lot of the institutional knowledge. So I appreciate all your years of service and everything that you've done, not just from your time in Congress and your heroic efforts on a baseball field, but your military service and your commitment to take care of your young family, and I do appreciate that. I just want to say, this is an issue, most people see many of us on TV shouting at the rain, but we are a body that can come together in a bipartisan way to get things done. And I think what you see in the subcommittee, and I think what you see in the House Admin Committee, you see that we can work together to deliver solutions to the American public. I just wish that on both sides, our colleagues would recognize that we can get along and we can do the right things for the American public. But I do want to ask you a couple questions. What are your views on the Select Committee's recommendation for the Joint Committee to investigate these issues more fully and make recommendations on what we're doing and what we're speaking about today?
Beyond recommendation, I'm pleased that you're doing it, as I've said. I mean, this is fantastic, probably long overdue, but I'm seeing serious conversations about a serious matter coming from both sides of the aisle, and I want you to drive on and keep going with this, that I hope can result in a change in how our laws read, how our Constitution reads, so that we are better able to serve the American people. And we don't want someone to be able to take away the voice of Americans here in this body. We are a democratic republic. We represent the people. They've selected us. And if there's something that happens, then someone that we recommend should be able to fill in temporarily until the normal state process can take place.
And I think it's also important to, I came in a special election, and I know the process that it took. We had to have a primary, we had to have a general, so our primary was, I think the congressman that had my seat before resigned, I believe it was the first part of the year, I'm not sure when Steve resigned, but our primary was done in August, and our general was done in November. And so we're able to do those. And I know Ohio isn't that way, but I think nationally we definitely need to do that. And again, I just want to say thank you for being here today. And Madam Chair and Derek, thank you for having this committee. This is an important issue and one that's thoughtful, one that I think we're going to get bipartisan support with. So with that, Madam Chair,
I think you're doing great work.
Thank you, Brad.